Pace data might be lying to you, and the more you trust it, the more fitness you might be leaving on the table. But first, if you're new here, I'm Brant Stachel, former national team running coach, registered psychotherapist, and mental performance coach. In over 15 years, I've coached over 150 athletes to Boston qualifiers and 24 international athletes to represent Canada. And so when I talk about RPE, I'm pulling from the physiology, the psychology, and what's actually worked on the track and the roads for years. So you might be asking, what RPE actually is. So as I always try to do, let's get the language straight, because people throw around the idea of train by feel or just listen to your body like it means something obvious. But I would argue it doesn't, at least not until you define it more precisely. When we do that, we learn to understand that rate of perceived exertion is a subjective measure, meaning you decide it, of how hard you're working. And it's based entirely on internal cues, such as your breathing pattern, muscular fatigue, overall sense of effort. Not pace, not heart rate, internal. And so the standardized scale that we look at all the time is 1 to 10. And so I'm going to break down a little bit in terms of each band and what it means. And I'm going to anchor each one of them to a breathing cue, because breathing is probably your most reliable real-time, in real life signal that we can all use. So an RPE of 1 or 2 is walking, very light movement. Breathing is completely normal. You could do this almost indefinitely. An RPE of 3 or 4 is probably easy running for most of us. Full sentences, no problem. Breathing is slightly elevated, but controlled. And this is where the majority of your training volume should probably live. 5 to 6 is moderate. Short sentences, maybe 5 or 6 words. Breathing, you're noticing it being elevated. And so for most runners, this is probably about marathon race pace. Whereas an RPE of 7 is comfortably hard. Short phrases, 3 or 4 words max is probably all you want to do. Breathing is heavy. So think your tempo territory, sustainable for 20 to 45, 50, 60 minutes. RPE of 8 is hard. 1 or 2 words if pressed. Your breathing is labored. Looking at your tempo to VO2 max range, max 10, 12, 15 minutes, not much longer. An RPE of 9 is very hard. You would not want to try to talk. It's near maximal. You've got a few minutes like this tops. And an RPE of 10 is an all-out sprint. It's measured in seconds, not minutes, and your body is telling you cannot continue. Now here's the inversion that changes everything. Effort is the input, pace is the output. Most runners tend to have that backwards. And so they set a pace target and they chase it, regardless of what their body is doing that day. But your body doesn't respond to pace in the same way it doesn't respond to miles. It responds to time. It responds to the metabolic and mechanical stress you're creating, which is determined by effort. So a run with an RPE of 4 on a fresh Tuesday morning, temps are great, no wind, you might average, let's say 9:15 per mile. But an RPE of 4 after a hard workout in 30-degree heat on a hilly trail, you might average 10:30. Same training stimulus internally, very different numbers on your watch. And so the watch is the output, and we need to stop treating it like it's the instruction. Let's go through the specific variables that make pace unreliable. First one, heat. So for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, your pace slows by approximately 20 to 30 seconds per mile at the same effort level. This was in a 2007 study in the Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise by Eli and colleagues. It's the most cited article in this space. It's quantified the relationship across nearly 2 million, I think it was 1.9 million, but nearly 2 million marathon results, and found that it holds across all performance levels. The mechanism is when ambient temperature rises, your body diverts blood flow from your skin for thermoregulation. The mechanism here is that when the ambient temperature rises, your body diverts blood flow to your skin for thermoregulation, cooling down. Less blood to the working muscles means less oxygen delivery, which means higher perceived effort at the same speed. So if your easy pace is 9 minutes per mile at 60 Fahrenheit, it's physiologically appropriate for it to be 9:45 at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And so if you're forcing that 9 minute per mile in the heat, you're running at a fundamentally different effort level and therefore different physiological stimulus than you think. The second variable, and this is one a lot of people don't consider, is fatigue, both cumulative and acute. And so if you ran a hard workout 2 days ago, your easy pace might be 30 to 60 seconds slower than baseline because your muscles haven't fully recovered. This is completely normal. I see this all the time across my athletes. It's also the exact moment when most runners tend to make the mistake of forcing their easy pace. And so they turn what's supposed to be a recovery run into a moderate effort run. And if you do that consistently and you accumulate fatigue, you can't absorb, which means you can't adapt to the training you're doing. The third variable, and this is the one I use as an example all the time because it seems to be the one that we understand the most kind of cognitively when presented with it, is terrain and altitude. Altitude alone can slow your pace by 30 to 60 seconds per mile. At the same effort due to reduced oxygen partial pressure. And then further, trail running induces variable footing, lateral stabilization demands, and elevation changes, all of which increase your metabolic costs without showing up in your pace data. A 10-minute mile on a technical trail may represent a harder effort than an 8:30 mile on a flat road. The fourth variable is sleep and stress. Your cardiovascular system doesn't distinguish between physical and psychological stress. A night of poor sleep or an unusually stressful work day raises baseline cortisol and can elevate resting heart rate by 5 to 10 beats per minute even. And so if you're chasing your standard pace under those conditions, you're adding aerobic stress on top of an already stressed system. The bottom line here is pace is influenced by at least half a dozen variables. Most all of them are outside of your control on any given day. And so effort and RPE is the constant that your body actually responds to. Elite athletes in African countries like Kenya and Ethiopia at training camps are overwhelmingly trained by feel, not pace targets, because effort is what the body adapts to. And they've built systems around that reality to adapt to the training that they're doing. So how do we build RPE awareness as runners? Maybe you're starting out, maybe you're trying to switch over from a system that didn't work for you. As any skill, it degrades if you don't practice it and improves systematically if you do. So here's the 4-step protocol I've used in the past, pulling from the literature and like applied application with runners. The first would be anchor your RPE to known data. So if you've got a route that is flat and it's a familiar course and it's in comfortable conditions and you're reasonably fresh, run what feels like to you at an RPE of 4. Here's the key. Check your pace afterwards. Then, another couple days later, run it at what feels like an RPE of 7. The loop should only be a couple miles, maybe. Now you have reference points. In good conditions, RPE is roughly here, and an RPE is roughly here of 7 and 4. These are your anchors. They're not targets you'll chase, but calibration points that you can refer back to. The second one, and everyone hates this one, is hide your watch. So for your easy runs over the next 4 weeks, don't look at your watch during the run. I know. Run at what feels like an RPE of 3 or 4. Use breathing cues as your primary real-time signal. If you can't speak in full sentences, you're above an RPE of 5 and you need to back off. After each run, then look at the pace. Was it close to your anchor? Faster? Slower? Note the conditions in your fatigue level. This is going to start building your data set. Step 3, calibrate for conditions. As you accumulate the data, you'll start to see patterns emerge. A hot day, your pace might drop 40 seconds for the same effort. Tired from a big week, 30 seconds. Hilly route, full minute off. And so once you've internalized these adjustments, you stop needing the watch to tell you whether you're running correctly. Step 4, use pace and/or heart rate as a secondary check. If you use these other metrics, you can start to triangulate the actual effort, pace, heart rate that you want to be. Heart rate alone is not the most reliable metric. It's affected by hydration, caffeine, temperature, cardiac drift, but early in the process, you can use it to validate. You can also use pace to validate. And so if you think you're at an RPE of 4, but your heart rate is sitting at 90% of max, your perception is off and we need to come back and recalibrate. Over time, as your RPE accuracy improves, the heart rate check becomes less necessary. Try not to calibrate off the first mile. The first 10 to 15 minutes of any run feel easy. And you see this mistake all the time in marathons. This must be marathon pace because it feels easy. It will always feel easier at the beginning than the sustained effort will. So runners who base their RPE off the first mile or the beginning of the run consistently go too fast and drift into moderate territory by miles 3, 4, 5. Evaluate your effort at miles 2, 3, 4 when your body is actually settled into the work. Here are some of the biggest mistakes I see in training with athletes who don't fully understand or utilize RPE. And so the first one would be they end up running their easy runs at like a moderate effort. The easy run should almost be embarrassingly slow at the start. If you're questioning whether you're going slow enough, you probably are. RPE 3 or 4 for 90 minutes means the same effort at minute 80 as it does at minutes 10, 15, 20. If you're going at a pace that only feels manageable for 30 minutes, not an easy run. The second mistake is using RPE to justify going harder. So some athletes flip the framework. So instead of using RPE to moderate effort on easy days, they use it to go harder on hard days. So they'll say something like, it felt like an RPE of 8, so I just kept pushing. RPE should be a ceiling as much as a floor. If the workout calls for an RPE of 7, such as tempo running at an RPE of 8 because you feel good isn't better execution. It's actually just a different workout. Mistake number 3 is ignoring external data when it conflicts. So if you ran what feels like an RPE of 4 and your pace was 2 minutes per mile slower than your anchor, that's a signal, probably not just noise. So either you're more fatigued than you realized, or you're getting sick, or your RPE calibration has drifted. So don't just explain it away. Let's be critical about it. Let's investigate. Let's think about it. The whole point of tracking pace as a post-run feedback is to catch exactly this kind of discrepancy. And the final mistake I see is giving up before the skill develops. Like any new skill, it's sucks at first. If any of you have tried swimming, you know it is a horrible skill to gain, but once you get it and you feel that pull with that catch, it's a beautiful feeling. And RPE calibration is much the same way. It can take weeks to months, not just days. You're going to misjudge your effort. It will happen. You'll look at your pace after an easy run and discover you were 20, 30, 45 seconds a mile too fast. It's part of the process. The athletes who stick with it for weeks at a time consistently report that it clicks. And once it does, they feel so much better. They adapt to their training better, and they actually improve and chase their goals and hit them. So if you want to integrate this into your training, here would be my recommendations. In weeks 1 through 4, easy runs only is where you're going to look at this. Don't look at your watch. Use breathing as your guide, check pace afterwards, and log the conditions in your fatigue level. This is going to build the foundation without disrupting your harder workouts. In weeks 5 to 8, add the long runs in by field protocol. Long runs should sit at a 3 or 4, with a natural drift to maybe a 5 in the final 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long you're going. Maybe this is a marathon build. The drift is normal. Don't fight it. Week 9's plus, let's start experimenting with tempo runs by feel. I like to have athletes do this early. This is just the protocol I've seen over time be put out there for athletes doing it. I like, especially for tempo from week 1 when we're doing tempos, to have that integration with RPE. Final integration piece would be keep pace based for race specific workouts, especially if you're doing 5K, 10K, even maybe 15K, maybe half marathon. Once you get up to the marathon, I think a lot of your early build runs should be based off RPE, not a specific pace or a goal marathon pace. So another question, I guess, how the heck do we use this on race day? Use effort to govern your early miles, not pace. So the most common cause of positive split blow-ups in distance racing is going out at a goal pace regardless of how it feels. If the first 5K of a marathon feels like an RPE of 7 instead of 6, you're already in trouble, even if the split looks right. Trust the effort. Let the pace be the outcome or the result. That's a complete framework. That's what RPE is, why pace misleads you, and how to build the skill. This is part of my ongoing series on training structure, pacing, and everything it takes to be a great distance runner. So if you can, or you haven't yet, check out some of my videos on easy runs, tempo, marathon pace, interval structure. I'm trying to put out everything I can to make sure you are a more informed and better runner. Next up, I'm going to have a bunch more on pretty much everything you can think of. I'm trying to build out one of the most complete libraries on distance training. And so if this was useful to you, a like or subscribe helps this channel grow. If it wasn't, let me know in the comments. What did I miss? Did I get something wrong? I try to do my best to read them and answer. Happy training.